talk about how technology can future-proof your supply chains and at the same time, have a positive impact on the patient, the planet, and profit. I've always been fascinated by technology, and that led me to go study electrical and computer engineering, back in University of Iceland, where I met my fellow nerd, Elli. And for your convenience, I put a label on myself because I do realize that I've lost a bit of hair since this picture was taken. But about 20 years ago, when access to wireless technology became more accessible, me and Elli, we joined forces with one of our teachers in university and two of my childhood friends. And we started to experiment with wireless technology, real-time access to data, cloud. And we soon realized that a business case of automation, real-time monitoring actually made sense in supply chains with perishable goods. They actually made up to a business case. So with that knowledge, that business case, that technology, we founded Controlant back in 2007. And then the swine flu pandemic in 2009 changed the course of Controlant permanently. That's where we discovered where our technology could have the biggest impact in pharma. So the five of us, the five friends, we started a journey that can probably best described as long and windy. It reminds me a little bit of a story of all the five friends that actually went on a story that was written by an author called Tolkien. Now, in that story, our teacher was definitely Gandalf, the old and wise wizard. And just like in the story, he disappeared. So he moved to the States and started developing technology for companies like Samsung and Google and others. But he always came around when we needed help. So that left us, the four childhood friends, the four young hobbits, on our journey. Now, I'm not sure which one I am in this analogy, but based on my height, I fit all of their profiles. So maybe a fun fact that has nothing to do with the topic. When Tolkien was writing his first story, The Hobbit, he had an Icelandic au pair called Adda. Adda was quite a storyteller, and she used to entertain Tolkien's children by telling stories, Icelandic folk tales and sagas. And Tolkien actually was, I think, inspired by those stories. And you can see a lot of resemblance in his books, in his stories, like the nature of Iceland, the trolls that turn into stone when they're exposed to daylight, volcanoes, of course. And I think we hold the record of the most people who still believe in elves. But our journey was, of course, not about destroying some ring. Rather, our journey is that we are living our vision of unleashing the power of people and technology to deliver zero-waste supply chains for patients, planets, and our partners. And here we are today, and has led me on this stage, still very enthusiastic about technology and what it can do to help future-proof the pharma supply chain. I would like to say that we are a trusted partner in the pharma when it comes to real-time visibility. I would also like to say that, for most of our customers, they don't just look at us as partners, but also as strategic partners. And as such, we've had the privilege to work with some of the most forward-thinking companies and the brightest minds in this industry. And some of them are even in this room here today. But that leads me maybe to the topic of today. That is how, to show you some examples of technology has really helped to future-proof supply chains and have a positive impact. Positive impact on patients, planet, and also the profit. These all needs to hold hand in hand as we're looking into the future. I think that's clear. But first we might ask ourselves the question, what is the future that we're actually future-proofing ourselves against? Now, if you look back, traditionally 90% of revenues in the pharma industry has been with small molecule products. But if we look a few years ahead of time, it's going to be a massive change. that used to be 10% of revenues is going to be a close 60% of revenues of new products, new types of medicine. That means that almost the entire growth in the pharma industry is with new products. Biologics, cell and gene therapies, personalized treatments, etc. Now, there are some things that they have in common. They are, they're more sensitive to distribute, shorter shelf life. They require, in many cases, new distribution model with increased risk, higher emissions, and they are much more costly to produce. So this is the future that we need to prepare ourselves for. And with that in mind, I want to go through some examples, some tried and tested examples of how to create value with technology. I want to start with maybe the most obvious one, and I promise I will stop talking about this in at least 2 years' time. But when faced with a pandemic, I think we all agree that the industry came together and they did something remarkable. I mean, obviously the first hurdle was to make sure to make a product in a record-breaking time. But one company, they also really focused on the supply chain. They did not want the supply chain to become a bottleneck of distributing those products if they would manage to make it happen. So one of the things that they knew is obviously that the demand would be much greater than the supply, especially in the beginning. They knew that every single delay, every single mishap could potentially affect a person's life. So they made a very bold decision on completely transforming their supply chain. And I was fortunate enough to actually participate in that transformation. I would say that one of the key decisions in the beginning was a decision that the entire project will be operated on single source of truth, real-time data that the entire ecosystem had access to. That meant that whether you are in operations, in quality, whether you are in your logistics companies or even thermal packaging providers, you all had access to real-time data to help to make the right decisions at the right time. Upper management had near real-time aggregation of performance. With this transformation, we also knew that we were going to ship products to an ecosystem that counted hundreds of thousands of people. As you can see, tens and tens of thousands of destinations, almost all world's countries. So we needed to make sure that we were also servicing that part of the ecosystem. That meant that we really needed to push information to those clinics, to those hospitals, make sure that they knew exactly when the products were arriving. And if any delays or changes, they would know about it immediately because they were actually planning for hundreds or even thousands of patients to come in and get vaccination. And as you are shipping directly to hospitals and clinics and pharmacies, the release process is the final step to protect the patient. We need to make sure that products could be released automatically or quarantined automatically to protect the patient. So yeah, it seems like an easy task. But I think having everyone working together, and this is obviously some experience that we'll probably never have again, to have an entire ecosystem working together for a single goal. But what truly, the magic happened during the project is that nobody was arguing about what data was correct. Nobody was asking for data, everyone had access, right? And instead, the entire ecosystem worked together to improve almost in real time on any type of issues that occurred. We had certain KPIs and beacons, like in the beginning, we had 99.998% successful deliveries, that kept us, motivated, even though we had to grind a lot in the beginning. But I think everyone came together, and I think the results speak of themselves. Now, for a triple bottom line, this supply chain actually has delivered about 40% of the world's COVID vaccines to date, even to the most rural areas in the world, to the low middle income countries. So that, of course, relates to the patient. I'm not sure I can back it up, but I do believe that millions of lives were saved during that process in every country of the world. And maybe what's more impressive, or impressive at least, is that the entire supply chain was driven with circularity. Every single IoT device used to monitor the shipments, the thermal packaging, they were all reusable. And the supply chain drove the circularity with 95 to 98% return rates, saving our planet's landfills and landfills of plastics, electronic components, batteries, etc. So I guess that project, checked in all of the three marks. And I think it taught us a lot on how we can use technology moving forward. 1 year ago, I was in States and at LogiPharma in Europe, where I had the privilege of having Dino Lokito from Ross talking about their digital journey. Their digital journey started by them asking the question, what do patients need next? The answer was, in their mind, earlier detection of treatment or illnesses, personalized treatments, shorter feedback loops, and highest quality standards. Okay, then they used that information and asked the next question. What does supply chain need next? Visibility, real-time, granular, validated. Lead times must shorten greatly and be extremely predictable. That's the conclusion that they came to. So they started analyzing, the process of getting product from plant to patient, and then soon figured out that from a time perspective, their biggest bottleneck was the release processes. A manual process, paper-based process, had human errors in it. That was causing the biggest delays. They always said, why can't we digitize that process? So they started on a journey. They digitized all of their transportation stability budgets for their products. They digitized the inbound checklists, and then they used real-time IoT to track their products and measure temperature, because temperature was one of the key elements and probably the biggest delay of product releases. So they set up a process where when a shipment arrived to a destination, the IoT technology could tell them and verify it was at the right destination. All the data was there in the cloud. It could be compared to the stability budgets, and there was an automatic release recommendation instantly. And the good thing about that this process occurred regardless if there was a deviation or not. So what it yielded is a 50% reduction in lead times. Really, really stable lead times. This was not changing anything in the transportation. It was just changing process and digitizing it. And the outcome, is like 95% reduction in manual inspecting temperature records. Auto release from a temperature standpoint of view, 99.5% of all deliveries, and 97% reduction in the time of delivery until a release recommendation is done. Now, of course, what they can now utilize this for is to reduce safety inventories and start to see a lot of cost savings and benefits. And this company there's no secret that this company is focusing entirely on different types of products, not on small molecules. And this is their way of future-proofing their supply chain, being prepared for these new products. Now, I'm frequently when we are approaching new companies that are trying to kind of figure the way on how can I actually start my transformation? How can I build business cases for going into real time? Do we actually need real time? They do know that if you start to use technologies, connect platforms together, use IoT devices, you start to collect a lot of data. Data itself is not a business case. It's about being able to transform that data to an information that you can reliably use to make data-driven decisions. So one of the let's say, the low-hanging fruits that we use to demonstrate to the companies is that the data that you're able to collect in more granular way than before, it allows you to actually automatically see your soft spots in a way that you've never been able to see it before. What's the performance on all of the airports that we're going through, dwelling times, excursion ratios, harbors, lanes, and even sublegs of lanes. And we have been able to reduce global excursion ratio by 20% by just changing one process in one country that they could never have discovered before. But didn't cost them anything, but a massive return of investment. And then, of course, there are loads of companies here in this conference that are experts in utilizing data, whether it's to create predictive ETAs, whether it is to simulate data, get all the data that we collect, create a simulation of lanes, thermal packaging with different products they're shipping. And typically we see as a first result, there's a $20 million cost savings if you do these changes here. And yes, we can reduce the CO2 footprint by 50%. So these are not small marginal incremental. These are actually big, big steps and improvements. So they can definitely have a huge impact on the profit part. Now, we have obviously gone through several transformations with our customers, and just maybe some of the commonalities that we see. Data is obviously key, but it can't be any data. People only trust data that's accurate, complete, and validated. If not, they don't trust the data, it is not going to work, or at least it's going to be much, much more challenging. I think us and other vendors here, they can really help to find those first, low-hanging fruits, those low risks that have a high yield impact that can help you actually get your business case and justify to start the transformation. And then once you start on that journey, you start to figure out your biggest soft spots, the next one will come up and you actually find yourself in continuous improvement loop. And at that, when you are there, you have started to actually future-proof your supply chain. Started by eliminating all the waste that maybe you couldn't figure out how to do in the past. But first, you need to ask yourself your question, what is the future that you want to future-proof you against? I think many companies are actually, and we see that, they are acting now. There's a big shift, and we are feeling that. And I think it's good because it's time to act now. The future isn't that far away. So for that time, I'm glad. And be aware that there are a lot of partners here in this exhibition that are here and willing and able to help you on that journey. Because that journey is not going to be straightforward. It's going to be long and windy. And actually a true story. This is a road from Iceland. When I was a teenager, I almost drove off a bridge on that road. And I'm actually very glad that I kept my headlight on during that journey. So make sure to keep your headlights on.